There is a strange moment in some relationships when a woman has spent months, sometimes years, wanting a man to choose her, imagining what it would feel like when he finally stopped holding back and made his feelings unmistakable. Yet when that moment actually arrives, something inside her does not move toward him. It pulls away. The very thing she thought would make her feel safe suddenly makes her uncomfortable, and the man who once seemed impossible to have becomes the man she is no longer sure she can accept. From the outside, it looks irrational. From the inside, it can feel like the most honest reaction she has ever had. Because sometimes the heart does not hesitate when it is uncertain about the person. It hesitates when reality threatens to destroy the fantasy that made the person so emotionally powerful in the first place. What makes this so confusing is that her desire may have been completely real. She may have wanted his attention, his presence, his affection, and the certainty that he felt something deeper than attraction. She may have spent countless moments wondering whether he would ever recognize what existed between them. But desire and readiness are not the same psychological experience. Wanting someone from a distance allows the mind to control the relationship. She can imagine his intentions without having to. The fantasy is emotionally safe because nothing has happened yet. The moment he chooses her, the imaginary relationship becomes real, and reality carries consequences that fantasy never had to face. That is where the hesitation begins. She is no longer asking herself whether he wants her. She is suddenly asking herself what happens if he does. If he comes closer, she has to become visible. If he becomes emotionally serious, she has to decide whether she can surrender the defenses that helped her feel in control. If he stops being uncertain, she loses the emotional distance that allowed her to study her feelings without being consumed by them. The man she wanted from across the emotional distance was predictable because she could never fully have him. The man standing in front of her, openly choosing her, is unpredictable because now she has something to lose. This is why some women become more emotionally conflicted at the exact moment they receive the reassurance they thought they needed. Uncertainty creates longing because the mind keeps searching for an answer. Every unanswered question becomes an invitation for imagination. But certainty ends the search. Once she knows he wants her, there is no longer a mystery to chase, and she has to confront the deeper question that uncertainty was protecting her from. Do I actually want the relationship, or did I want the feeling of finally being wanted by him? Those two desires can exist at the same time, which is what makes the situation so painful. She can genuinely care about him and still hesitate when he becomes available. She can have imagined his arms around her and still feel strangely exposed when he finally reaches for her. She can have wanted him to admit what he felt and then discover that hearing it creates pressure rather than relief. This does not necessarily mean her feelings were fake. It means her emotional attachment may have been built partly around anticipation, and anticipation is powerful because it allows desire to exist without demanding vulnerability. There is another reason she may hesitate, and it is even more uncomfortable. Sometimes a person becomes emotionally attractive because they seem capable of rejecting you. His independence, restraint, emotional control, or apparent indifference may have created a psychological challenge. She may have interpreted his distance as depth because she had to work to understand him. His attention felt valuable partly because it was not guaranteed. His affection carried weight because she could not assume she had it. When he finally chooses her, the psychological structure that created the attraction changes. The challenge disappears, and she is left wondering whether what she felt was love for him or attachment to the emotional tension surrounding him. This is why someone can spend so long wanting a man and then become strangely cautious when he finally becomes emotionally available. The mind is not always attracted to the person alone. It can become attached to the emotional state the person creates. Longing, uncertainty, anticipation, jealousy, hope, fear, and imagined closeness can create an intensity that feels indistinguishable from love. But intensity is not always intimacy. Sometimes intensity is simply what happens when the nervous system cannot determine whether something will be gained or lost. And there is something else she may not admit even to herself: being chosen means being seen. While she was wondering whether he wanted her, she could remain protected behind her own uncertainty. She could imagine herself as desirable without having to discover whether she could actually sustain emotional closeness. But once he chooses her, the protection disappears. Now he will see her habits, insecurities, contradictions, fears, and emotional needs. The fantasy version of herself was effortless. The real version has to participate. That can be terrifying for someone who has secretly built her confidence around being desired rather than being deeply known. Being desired can happen at a distance. Being known requires exposure. A man can admire her beauty, crave her presence, and imagine a future with her without ever touching the parts of her that she has spent years protecting. But when he chooses her seriously, she can no longer hide behind the possibility of what they might become. She has to discover what they actually are. Sometimes the hesitation is also connected to an old emotional pattern. If she has learned, through past experiences, that closeness eventually leads to disappointment, then genuine affection can activate fear instead of peace. The closer he gets, the more valuable the relationship becomes, and therefore the more dangerous losing it feels. Her mind may begin searching for reasons to retreat before she becomes dependent on something she cannot control. She may question his intentions, become hyper-aware. The strange part is that the imperfections may be real. The problem is not that she notices them. The problem is that she may suddenly experience them with an intensity that was absent before he chose her. Distance allowed her to idealize him. Closeness forces her to evaluate him. And evaluation is much less romantic than longing. This is where the man often becomes confused. He may think, I finally gave her what she wanted, so why is she pulling away? But emotionally, he may not realize that his decision has changed the entire psychological equation. Before, she was trying to reach him. Now she has to decide whether she wants to let him reach her. Those are completely different positions. Pursuing someone allows you to focus on their value. Being pursued forces you to confront your own value, your own fears, and your ability to receive what you once begged the universe to give you. There is also a subtle grief hidden inside her hesitation. Sometimes the moment a person gets what they wanted is the moment they realize how much of their emotional life was built around wanting it. The longing gave their days a narrative. There was a person to think about, a possibility to imagine, a future to construct privately. Once the future becomes possible, the fantasy has nowhere left to hide. She may suddenly miss the uncertainty because uncertainty gave her room to dream. That is why her hesitation can look like rejection when it is actually conflict. Part of her is moving toward him because she has wanted this closeness. Another part is moving backward because closeness threatens the emotional defenses that kept her safe. One side says, this is what I wanted. The other quietly asks, what happens to me if I let myself have it? And that question can be more powerful than attraction itself. Because choosing someone is not only about recognizing their value. It is about accepting what their presence awakens inside you. A man can be everything she thought she wanted and still trigger fears she never had to confront while he was distant. His certainty can make her question her own. His affection can make her suspicious because she is accustomed to earning affection rather than receiving it. His seriousness can create pressure because now she has to decide whether she is willing to become emotionally accountable to another person. Sometimes, the woman does not hesitate because she does not want him. She hesitates because she wants him enough for the possibility of losing him to become frightening. And sometimes that fear wins. She begins creating emotional distance. She tells herself she needs time. She notices every reason the relationship might fail. She becomes less certain, not because his feelings suddenly became less meaningful, but because his feelings made hers impossible to ignore. What once existed safely inside imagination now requires a decision. This is the cruel irony of attraction. The person you spend the most time wanting can become the person you fear the most when they finally become real. Not because they changed, but because the psychological meaning of their presence changed. Before, he represented possibility. Now he represents intimacy. Before, she could wonder whether he would choose her. Now she has to decide whether she can choose him without losing the emotional control she built her life around. And sometimes she realizes that what she wanted was not simply the men. She wanted the moment of being chosen by the men. She wanted proof that she was desirable enough, important enough, unforgettable enough to make him finally surrender his distance. Once she receives that proof, the emotional hunger that drove her toward him can suddenly disappear, leaving behind a much harder question. If being chosen was the destination, what happens when you finally arrive? That is why some love stories become most complicated at the exact moment they should become simple. The confession is made. The feelings are known. The distance has finally disappeared. And instead of relief, there is silence inside her because the uncertainty that once protected her has been removed. The man thinks he has finally reached her. She may be discovering that she now has nowhere left to hide from herself. And perhaps that is the deepest reason she hesitates when the man she wants finally chooses her. Sometimes the hardest thing is not getting the person you have been waiting for. The hardest thing is standing in front of them after they finally choose you and realizing that the person you were while waiting for them cannot survive the reality of being loved. Because once someone stops being a possibility and becomes yours to accept, desire is no longer enough. The fantasy has ended. The emotional distance is gone. And somewhere between the love she imagined and the love standing in front of her, she has to confront the one question she spent all the time avoiding. Was she afraid that he would never choose her, or was she secretly afraid of what would happen if he finally did?